Hello, my name is Charlotte Rodewald. I am currently taking Clark University's Art of the Western World Survey 2, taught by Dr. Brian Zygmunt. Today I will talk about the 19th century French Impressionist painter, draftsman, graphic artist, and sculptor Edgar Degas and his painting Ballet Rehearsal from 1876. Edgar Degas was born on July 19, 1834 in Paris, France, to a Franco-Italian family. He was the oldest of 5 children. His father, Auguste Degas, was a rich banker who provided his family with a lavish lifestyle. His mother, Celestine Mousson Degas, was an American from New Orleans. Her family was prominent in the city and had a colorful history. Degas was taught a standard bourgeois education, one taught to the common man or middle class. But due to his wealthy childhood, he was encouraged to pursue the arts at an early age. Even his wealthy parents, however, never expected him to make a career in the arts. Degas started to study law, but in 1854 he changed to training in art at the École des Beaux-Arts. He studied under Louise Lamothe, who was a pupil of Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, the famous French neoclassical painter. When Degas met Ingres at the exposition of Gustave Courbet's Pavilion of Realism, he was encouraged to draw lines. Degas took this advice to heart, and this was the beginning of him becoming a master classical draftsman. He would later develop skills as a colorist and combine them with his extraordinary ability to draw. Usually, French artists were skilled in either color or detail, using only one skill in their paintings. Degas, however, used both of these opposing skills in his work. In 1854, Edgar Degas traveled to Naples and Rome to study classical artwork. He visited his aunt, who just happened to be the Baroness Bernini. He was 22 years old and studied in Italy for 3 years. He practically lived in the museums and galleries, studying the works of Michelangelo, Raphael, and Titian. He brought back an education of the old masters and the classical art style of the Renaissance when he returned to Paris in 1861. He focused on painting portraits and compositions in a classical style. He eventually began to branch out to painting the subjects that would earn his reputation, dancers, races, and town life, but most popular, his ballet dancers. In 1864, Edgar met Edouard Manet at the Louvre. They just happened to be copying the same painting. This was, and still is, very common for art students to copy the works of the masters. It is one of the best ways to teach different painting styles. It is not considered forgery unless the artist claims it was painted by that master. The meeting of these two students introduced Degas to Impressionism and the Impressionists group. Impressionism was created by a group of art students in Paris, France, as a form of rebellion. Instead of detail-oriented paintings like realism, painters tried to convey the idea the viewer would get from a glimpse of the scene. Impressionism also focused on bold colors that are light and vibrant. Many critics described their work as blurry and unfocused. They did not focus on subjects of history or romance, but on nature or the beauty of everyday life. Their brushstrokes had a feathery aspect to them, much like romantic paintings in the past, focusing more on the lights and colors instead of the scene than exact details or context. Artists of this time were obsessed with painting outside the studio, in the open air. Impressionist artists developed some of the first tubes to carry oil paint so they could paint outdoors. Degas, however, painted with pastels, a chalk-like medium that is pure pigment turned to a powder and held together by a binder. His paintings have several layers of pastels on them, each layer separated by a fixative that the recipe is still a mystery today. In the painting featured on screen, we can see a ballet studio full of ballet dancers practicing, sitting, and basically going about a regular class. There is a staircase to the left of the image, where a pair of feet can be seen going down the steps. 2 older women are shown, one in the background to the right, watching a group of ballerinas in mid-penché. It would be logical to assume that this is a penché, because the leg is straight out behind them in an arabesque, and a penché is an arabesque, but the leg and torso move together forward, because the back must remain straight. The art is more relaxed as it goes down to give a graceful effect. The other woman is much closer to the viewer. She seems to be fixing the tulle of the tutu of the ballerina closest to us. The end of the tulle is cut and made of holes, so it tends to stick together. We need to straighten it out to bring back the volume. Due to the fact that Degas was wealthy, he did not have to focus on making money through selling his paintings. This gave him a lot more freedom to develop the style separate from his Impressionist colleagues. Degas differed in preference on many characteristics of Impressionism, which we can see in his painting, Ballet Rehearsal. He preferred to work indoors in his studio and was not interested in natural light. This is why many of his paintings feature indoor settings like what we see in the painting on screen, a ballet studio. He did change subject matter to the more contemporary themes used by other Impressionists, but was not interested in landscapes or the effect of light and atmosphere on nature. He had a focus on women, such as dancers, laundresses, and bathers, but wanted to show them in a natural pose or setting that one could find in the action photography of the day. He was the only one of the Impressionist group to have an academic background, and remained more interested in draftsmanship than Impressionist painting. He did agree with the Impressionists in trying to convey an unplanned scene where the viewer just happened onto the setting. Degas tried to implement this mentality into his work, even though the composition was heavily thought out and anything but spontaneous. The figures are cut off at the sides as well, a further influence of photography, though this would be from poorly executed photography. In 1870, Degas changed his name from Degas to Degas. It doesn't sound like much of a difference, but he believed it sounded less pretentious. The name originally was separated between the DE and the GAS for his last name. Edgar decided to push them together to form the Degas we know today. Even though Degas is listed as a key member of the Impressionists and he supported the group in their rebellion against the rigid art community of the time, he painted what he wanted to paint. If he wanted to paint more classically, he did so. His paintings, despite their Impressionist influences, do still have influences from neoclassicism and Renaissance painters. His colors were much duller in tone than other Impressionists. He rebelled with the Impressionists, but he also rebelled against conforming to a singular style. In his later years, he shifted away even more from the Impressionists. During his life, Degas rebelled against becoming a law student, studying a classical painter, and remaining only an Impressionist. He truly was a rebel at heart. Thank you very much. That is all for today.